Ukraine's known for many things: flowing fields of wheat, the special food their culture has, or even the massive mountains in the east. Its rich agricultural economy has developed over the course of hundreds of years. Mainly consisting of farmland, the country itself didn't actually have much independence for most of its history, only beginning its first bid for independence during the 1910s and 1920s. Instead of dumping tea into their harbor like other countries, what they did was different. Right after World War I, Europe and Asia fell apart, and the powers that controlled Ukraine started to crumble with it, meaning that Ukraine could use the turmoil to become their own nation. However, the fight for independence didn't last too long because soon came one of the darkest parts in Ukraine history. Ukraine's culture was extremely farming dependent, especially in the early 1900s. Ukrainian farmers ran on a crop cycle, meaning after years of planting and harvesting, a year would be taken off to revitalize soil. During the years where they were not actively harvesting, food storages were crucial so the Ukrainian farmers didn't starve. To get a more direct source of information, we interviewed Alex's grandmother, a first generation Ukraine immigrant who is very knowledgeable about Holodomor and spoke to many survivors.
First off, Baba, why don't we get a name, name and relation? Sort of. You have to introduce yourself.
Okay. Um, Hello, my name is Maria Sidarchuk, and I am Alex Swanson's grandmother,
Or Baba.
or Baba, yes, lovingly called Baba.
Exactly.
Well, the farming in Ukraine was always very important because Ukraine is an agrarian country where the soil supposedly is so rich that somebody once said that if you put a boot into the soil, by next season you'll have something growing out of it.
So
Right.
it pretty much held up the economy.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
because it was pretty much there was no industrial economy at the time, so
Right.
everything was an agrarian kind of a um, economy.
Of course.
Before their independence, the land that is now Ukraine was controlled by the Austria-Hungarians and Russians. After Austria-Hungary disbanded post-World War I, and with the Russian Revolution on the horizon, Ukraine was given a golden opportunity. The Russian Revolution began in 1917, with the major players being the Red Army Communists, the White Army Anti-Communists, and the Green Army. The Green Army was almost exclusively Ukrainian army, and in 1918, Ukraine declared itself an independent nation, with a constitution and everything. Ukraine's initial independence lasted all of 4 years because in 1922, Russia, now the USSR, had taken control of Kiev and influenced, but really forced, into joining the USSR. Lenin was the first big man in charge of the USSR, but he was not the only one to blame for Holodomor. After conquering Kiev, Lenin realized that it'd be hard to force the people of Ukraine to follow the USSR. Lenin, even though he wasn't a huge fan of Ukraine, encouraged some amount of Ukrainian independence and growth for culture. Ukrainian national pride was very strong and still continues to be to modern day.
Right.
They were fighting for land. They would go in and take the land from people, but they somehow managed to let the people still live and still continue their own culture,
Mm-hmm.
even though their land didn't belong to them anymore.
Eventually, Ukraine, through the efforts of a Bolshevik supporting council under the CPBU, aka the Ukrainian Communist Party, gave up most of its individual power. At its founding, the party of 5,000 was only 7% Ukrainian. At its peak, the party was only 20% Ukrainian. This next part is a little boring with a lot of annoying acronyms, but is really, really important to the context of Holodomor, so I suggest you pay attention. The CPBU stripped foreign trade, rights to an army, and created their own legislation. They were also fully integrated into the USSR. The point on these two unions was to take all of the independent powers of the countries and give control to Moscow. So, as a quick summary that isn't quite boring, Ukraine gave up a lot of its independent power and government control, and Russia was taking a step towards genocide through discrimination and the organization and control that Moscow had.
Stalin took control of the USSR in 1924, and it was clear that he was not accepting of Ukraine. The issue came down to food. Stalin and the Bolsheviks controlled a lot of Russia's industrial heartland, but they didn't have a lot of control of the more rural areas of the country because of the residual parts of the White Army that remained. A part of Stalin's first 5-year plan was a collectivization of industry and agriculture. At the end of it, Stalin wanted to have complete control over both of these industries. Stalin's plan to collectivize Ukraine started with seizing farms, but quickly became an extermination of Ukrainian people.
It is a genocide,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't. It's just to the point where there's a lot of corruption going on. People are getting paid left and right, and yet the the genuine Ukrainian people who had their little houses, who had their little gardens at that time, where peace was finally at hand for a short while. They were beginning to feel comfortable.
Right.
And then in the middle of the night, they had to run. So it is, I don't know if it started out as a genocide, but this is what it's ending up to be. Cities are getting blown up. Churches are getting blown up, cultural, historical.
Would you describe that as dehumanization?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
It really, I think it's very hard for people to understand how harmful something like this is. But here we are in the United States, and we are blessed. We are so lucky to have the freedoms that we still have.
This was a large part of the reason that Stalin wanted to begin collectivization. He started by executing or capturing church leaders, pro-Ukrainian politicians, and Ukrainian intellectuals. His hope was to feed the industrial heartland with the grain from Ukraine. Stalin knew they wouldn't go peacefully, so he named his first real enemy in Holodomor. Successful farmers, especially those who opposed the revolution, were called kulaks, translating to fist. He created an image of violence by calling them that, dehumanizing them. He started a policy of dehumanization, which was killing or kidnapping kulaks to work on collectivized farms. These farms were seized from Ukrainian farmers and became work camps to export grain to Russia.
In 1932, Stalin made the decree of 5 stocks of grain, which stated that anyone, even children, were not allowed to take anything from a collectivized field, and anyone caught would be shot or imprisoned. At the end of 1933, nearly 55,000 people were tried and 20,000 were executed. As Holodomor escalated, people would try to leave Ukraine, and Stalin effectively sealed the borders in January of 1933. Travel internally was heavily restricted, and even the Kuban region of Russia, which was mostly ethnic Ukrainians, was sealed off.
Holodomor happened on the east side of Ukraine, on the eastern coast, on the eastern area, southeastern area, whereas Baba was born in the northwestern area. So at
Okay.
that time, travel was very limited, and
Right.
she probably just stayed put.
At this point, it is clear that it was not just some plan for agriculture, but an attack on ethnic Ukrainians. Stalin began blacklisting villages, calling in the army to prevent anyone from coming in or out of the village. It was a death sentence for a whole town. Special brigades would raid homes looking for any bits of food that could be hidden by peasants or farmers. To escape death by starvation, Ukrainians would eat anything they could find: pets, plants, and in extreme cases, cannibalism.
You said you talked to some of the survivors yourself. Did they mention their experience at all?
They were already like in their late 80s, early 90s.
Right.
And the memory of what had happened, they had kind of erased a lot of it. So they weren't very open to expressing their fear or their memories, because it was something that was so horrific when they saw, when you're a young child, let's say you're 6, 7, and your parents are gone, and you don't know where they are, and there is nobody there to care for you, and you're just struggling there by yourself, and you're hungry, and you can't make it. It's such a deep pain and such a deep emotion that I do believe a lot of people just don't want to ever remember that
Like
again.
close it off in their mind, do you think?
Yeah.
At its peak in June of 1933, Ukrainians were dying at a rate of 28,000 people per day.
Do you know how bad it actually got when they were being starved out?
Well, all I can say is that I read about it and heard stories from some of the survivors that I happened to meet while working in the Ukrainian community.
Oh, you
And
met some.
I did.
Perfect.
I met some people who had survived. Well, the starvation was horrendous
Mm-hmm.
because it got reduced to where cannibalism took effect
Oh my God.
in some regions. Absolutely. It was so horrendous. It was an event, the whole event, the whole Holodomor event was being hidden from the Western world.
Exactly.
And during that time, the Western world in the United States was also going through a depressing time
Right.
because the Great Depression had hit, and so nobody was really interested in helping the Ukrainians who were absolutely starving to death.
Mm-hmm.
When reporters had gone down there to see what the situation was like. There were two known reporters who went down there to verify what was going on. So one reporter, his name was Garrett Jones, and he could not believe, he was from the UK, and he
Mm-hmm.
could not believe how horrendous the situation was. So when he went back to write the story, people doubted what he was saying. It can't be that bad. It can't. You're. They just didn't believe that something that bad was happening.
Right.
So then, within a short time, there was another reporter who went down there, and his name was Walter Durante,
Mm-hmm.
and he had already been probably paid off by the Stalin regime to say that, oh no, everything is fine, there is no problem. It's just an exaggeration of what is going on.
Do you think that like getting paid off and sort of like Stalin doing a good job paying off everybody is part of the reason why nobody really has ever heard of it before, or why it was so hidden from the West?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Uh, Stalin was a maniacal man. He came from a country called Georgia, and when he was allowed to have power, he was completely not enlightened about anything. All he was driven by greed, and he was driven by power.
While an exact death toll is almost impossible to get, with some historians estimating 2 million and others 7 to 10 million, the general consensus is that 3.9 million people died during Holodomor, which is only a period of a little bit more than 1 year. While the Ukrainian people were suffering, Russia extracted 4.27 million tons of grain in 1932, which was enough to feed 12 million people. In 1933, they had enough reserves to feed 10 million people. Rather than help the Ukrainian people or accept outside aid from those who offered, Moscow exported Ukraine's grain and other food for cash abroad. After the collapse of the USSR, access to records showing that Holodomor was not only an intentional starvation, but a genocide created to kill the Ukrainian people. The goal was to kill Ukrainian nationalism and the most prosperous part of their country. Holodomor ended with the harvest of 1933, and once almost all of Ukraine's farmland had been collectivized. After Holodomor, the Ukrainian population and country were in ruin. The Ukrainian village, as it was known until then, was essentially destroyed. While we tried to find census data to show in exact numbers the losses, no such data exists. When you do look for data, you see a slow growth from 1950. That's when the record started. Comparing to other genocides, it has the same pattern of a slow growth into a plateau, but in Ukraine's case, there's a sharp drop in 2020. This is, of course, the modern day conflict between Russia and Ukraine. This started because during and after Holodomor, ethnic Russians moved into some seized farms from Ukrainians, which led to a population of Russian people in modern day Ukraine. Because of this and their affiliation with the USSR, some Russian people, including Vladimir Putin, believe that Ukraine belongs to Russia. Despite all the setbacks, erasure of culture, discrimination, and conflict, Ukraine is still doing its best to survive and thrive today. Holodomor is remembered by the families of those who survived. And many organizations exist to spread awareness. And the world has learned from Holodomor and similar atrocities, helping Ukraine in their fight against Russia.
I would like to say that as a closing statement for the younger generation to be aware of what is going on in this world, to always look for the truth and always look for justice and don't fall for gimmicks. And that's what I would like to share.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you for watching and learning about Holodomor.
Real quick,
Recording? Okay.
Before you start, what is this?
Miscellaneous shit. I was just like, this is kind of cool, but I didn't know where to put it, so it's just at the bottom in case you're like, I need to put something here. I don't know.
You just put this because it's a fucking.
Because it's an absolute heater of a quote. You cannot believe man's inhumanity to man.
Oh my.
Who the fuck are we? Oppenheimer?
Oh
That's
my
a bar and a half.
God!
Oh shit, we're still recording. Second to last paragraph. Recording for 3 seconds. Should be good.
Man, I did sound sleep deprived as fuck in that fucking 4 a.m. video.
I
Alright, let's
have
go.
to wait.
My
Okay.
bad! Alright, let's go.
Am I good? Okay, I think I'm good now. Take 3! Let's get into
In
it.
this biatch!
We what the fuck?
We kind of look like Larry and the tomato. Like, it's all in one.
Okay. You gotta let me spit.
Cook!
In
me.
1930
Oven's on. Alright, let's go.
In 1932.
Start again. I'm sorry.
God damn
I'm
it.
sorry.
In 1932, Stalin made the decree of 5 stalks of.
So
Why are you
my
doing
hand
this?
on the desk. I'm sorry. Do it again.
Get out.
No.
In 1932.
Oh my! Give it a 5-second pause and then start. Eventually, through Ukraine, its efforts of Bolshevik... Fuck. Whatever, I'll add that. Travel internally was heavily restricted, and even the Kuban religion... Religion? What the fuck are you talking about? Because the work camps exported grain to Russia. Exported? The fuck does that mean? The Russian Revolution began in 1917, with the major players being the Red Army Communist, the White Army Bro! As part of Stalin's first 5-year plan was a collective... What the fuck? He created an image by fuck.
I'm getting gassed out.
To get a more direct source of information, we interviewed Alex's grandmother, a first-generation Ukraine immigrant who is very knowledgeable about Holodomor and spoke to many survivors. Fuck! Damn it!